All right, good evening, everybody. I'll call this meeting to order. It's the September 25th, 2025 meeting of the Olentangy Board of Education. Mr. Jenkins, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Lester?
Here.
Dr. Daberco?
Here.
Dr. Wallach?
Here.
Ms. Schreiber?
Here.
All right, thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll just note that Mr. O'Brien unfortunately had a work commitment tonight, so he's unable to be here, but we'll miss him in our meeting. I don't believe that we have any amendments to the agenda. Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none, Mr. Jenkins.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Daberco?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
All right, for the board president's report, we have a lot of things on the agenda, so I'll move relatively quickly. Just a couple things I wanted to highlight. First of all, as we've been talking, we have a bond issue on the ballot. We've been doing a lot of work to try to engage the community about that, talk about different aspects of it. We know that things around school funding are complex sometimes, so it's always helpful to try to answer as many questions as we have and be as open as we can be. We encourage people to go to the website, go to the social media, look at everything that we can, but sometimes we hear questions that we address here at board meetings as well. So a question I recently received was, all right, well, you're taking on a lot of debt. Is that a good idea? What are the issues that might come with taking on a lot of debt? And in fact, the bond issue does take on debt because we're financing the construction of new school buildings, and school buildings are expensive. Anybody that's bought a house knows the houses are expensive. School buildings are really expensive. This bond issue, would be about $235 million between the construction of a new high school and a new elementary school and the associated construction projects. So the question is taking on a debt, something that the district should entertain? I'm not going to speak for all of the other board members. We all sort of have our own reasons for why we voted to put it on the ballot. But I think personally, what I look for is there are times when it makes sense to take on debt, and there are times where it doesn't make sense to take on debt. Just like in your personal finances, you don't want to run up your credit cards with things that you can't really afford, but sometimes you buy a house, and that's a good form of debt, and it makes sense. Here in the district, we are experiencing really rapid, tremendous growth of 500 new students every single year. We know that we need capacity to be able to educate those students and do it at a level that the community has come to expect of Olentangy. And so we look at how we go about doing that, and this particular measure is a no new millage measure, which allows us to do that without increasing the millage level on the community. So we know that we have that capacity, that's something that the community has been accustomed to. We know that it's a response to the growth that we have, and it's not tacking on some of those additional costs. So, that personally for me, as I went through the calculus of this, realizing that even though we could collect additional millage for this, we don't have to because of how we've managed it and because of how we've been able to manage some of our refinancing and the good rates and all of that. To me, it made sense to put it on the ballot. But I appreciate the question because we always do want to be sensitive to debt as we're going about that. So happy to have other questions. If people have other questions, certainly let us know. I know, turning to the next topic, I know Mr. Meyer will talk about this briefly in his report, but I wanted to note Dr. Wallach and I were both at the Bridging the Future event the other day. Our Bridge Ed program is really extraordinary, right? It's an example of the amazing things that this district does and is able to do to not just serve students and families, but to serve the entire community. It was a great thrill to have Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel there, and he made a note in his presentation that I noted in a post I did on my board social media page, but he said, this is exactly what Ohio needs. This is exactly the sort of thing that is promoting that level of workforce development, that's connecting those dots, that goes above and beyond what we are required to do as a school district. It is us serving the community more broadly, serving the interests of the state more broadly, and we're able to do it without spending more than even the average school district in the state. It's an extraordinary sort of thing, and it's part of just our broader service to the community. So I was really glad to see he was there, a number of other elected officials were there, and it's work that we're going to continue to do because it's the right thing to do for our students, it's the right thing to do for our families, and it's the right thing to do for the broader community. But it's just something that I think people need to realize that not every school district is doing this. This is us as a district being proactive to solve the issues that are facing our state, our nation more broadly. It was really a great event. I know Mr. Meyer will speak of it more broadly. The last thing I'll do is just committee updates. We had the Mental Health Committee meeting last week. It was our first meeting of the year. We welcomed some new members, including some new students. It is always great to welcome new students to that, to get their perspective. That committee was really formed as a way to try to make sure that we're getting the perspectives of everybody who is a user of our mental health services, which is really everybody in the community, all the students and families and staff and administrators, and make sure that we're tailoring things to work the right way. I continue to be incredibly impressed by the thoughtfulness of our students, our parents, in talking openly, honestly, about some very difficult subjects and helping us move forward as a district. So I'm so thankful for them. We're going to continue that work every month. So it's great. Any other committee updates? I don't think so.
No committee updates, just Mr. Gully from People Services invited me to some of the presentations he's been doing around the district for the Seal of Biliteracy, which is really awesome to learn about. While I was in those meetings, students have to show proficiency in their English language and then one other language, and it can be either the subject that they're taking in school or one of their home languages, and they get that seal on their diploma. Opens them up to scholarships from the district as well as from the schools that they're planning on attending. And the district, I've learned, can also pay for these students to get their certification to be a translator and interpreter and get hired by the district. So there's an Orange student that this summer was hired on after she graduated to interpret for things like Technology Night and things like that. So that's awesome. And I don't think you'll find any other job right out of high school that'll pay $45 an hour, but that's yeah. So it was great to be in the buildings and see some of that education being brought out, and the kids were really excited, and Mr. Gully did a great job getting them interested and excited about the opportunities. So tomorrow is the last day to sign up for the October Avant test for the Seal of Biliteracy. I just wanted to note that for anybody who's listening.
Yeah, that's great.
And there's one more in the spring, but for the fall, tomorrow's the deadline.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, with that, we'll move straight into our first presentation. So we have Ms. Brunswick here to talk about the state report cards.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm once again honored to be able to be the one to share the incredibly great news on the Ohio school report cards that were released on September 15th. So just a little over, about almost 2 weeks ago. And while there is always a lot of great news to share on our report card, we always do want to strive to get better and know that we have the mindset of continuous improvement. And so the incredible opportunities that our students have in the arts and athletics and extracurriculars and all of those things aren't necessarily captured on this report card. So this is a snapshot of some of the success that our students have, though we know it's not that full picture. We also know that the report card can look very simple on the surface with just looking at star ratings, but it's important to really dig into that information to see what are the real specific successes and areas for growth. And that is something that we did at a principal meeting this week, looking really into making sure we have a deep understanding of what it's measuring, and then looking at the building-specific data to kind of identify some of those things. So tonight I'm going to be going through each component, highlighting some of the results and for both the district and the building. So to begin, this is a snapshot of our district report card. We're going to spend the next few minutes going through each of the different 6 components that are measured on the report card. You can see them up here: achievement, progress, gap closing, graduation, early literacy, and then rated for the first time, the college, career, workforce, and military readiness measure. So we're going to talk a little bit about how these things are measured and then how our district did. So to start off with the overall rating, this is calculated from those 6 components that the district has. The ratings can fall anywhere between 1 and 5 stars, and this is the only component that can be given a half-star rating. So the district, as you can see up there, is a 5-star district for the 3rd year in a row. So since we've had overall ratings, we've earned that 5-star. We are one of only 47 districts in the state to earn 5 stars overall, which means only 7.7% of the districts have achieved this. We are also the only district that has over 10,000 students to be a 5-star overall district. There were 6 other in Central Ohio who have anywhere between 1,100 students and 6,600 students. So being a district of our magnitude and being able to achieve that as a 5-star overall is incredible. Our overall ratings for our schools, you can see the distribution up here on the graph to the right. All of our schools are at least meeting state standards, with 10 schools exceeding state standards and 16 of our schools significantly exceeding state standards on this overall measure. We also want to highlight 3 of our schools, and they have achieved the incredible accomplishment of not only earning 5 stars overall, but they earned 5 stars on all of their components. So Shale Meadows Elementary and Tyler Run were 2 of only 7 elementary schools in the state to accomplish this. And Berlin Middle School was 1 of only 5 middle schools in the state to accomplish 5-star ratings across the board. So now to dig into some of the measures. The achievement measure is going to be measuring the academic achievement of all students. And this is going to include results on the Ohio State test, the alternate assessment, as well as some select AP assessments. Our performance index is going to be calculated using the performance levels that our students achieved, and then we divide that by what the state calculates to be the max performance index in the state. And that number does change slightly each year because they calculate it by averaging the top 2% of districts across the state. So the state maximum was a 109.8, and we exceeded that 90% threshold with a 94.6 of that max score, which earned us that 5-star rating. Couple of highlights with this. This was an increase of 0.8 from our performance index last year. So Mr. Meyer talks a lot about how we are a very high achieving district, and sometimes it's hard to continue to get better and better. And our students, teachers, and community helped us do that. Our performance index is also ranked 32nd in the state, which is up 7 spots from last year. So we are in the top 5.3%. We are the only district over 10,000 students to have a 5-star in achievement. And the other districts within that over 10,000, we outscored their performance index by over 6 points. When we look at Central Ohio districts, because we do kind of like to compare similar districts that perform like us, we did have the 4th highest performance index in Central Ohio, behind Granville, that has about 2,400 students, Grandview with about 1,100 students, and New Albany with about 4,900 students.
Was there one more? You said 4?
We were 4th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, we were 4th. You can see the distribution for our schools here. All of our schools are exceeding the state standards, and 24 of our 27 are significantly exceeding state standards in achievement. We do like to rank our elementaries, or all of our schools, with other schools around the state who have similar grade bands tested. So for our elementaries, all of them were in the top 26.6% of the state, with 11 of our schools in the top 10%. Middle schools, all of them were in the top 12.5%, with 3 in the top 5%. And then all of our high schools were in the top 6.9% of high schools, with 3 of them in the top 5% as well. The second component that we wanted to talk about is progress. And achievement and progress are the 2 measures that are weighted the most heavily to contribute to that overall rating. Progress is going to measure the student growth from one year to the next on different state tests. It is a comparative measure that looks at how students are performing to similar students like them or average students across the state. So we like to conceptually think about it with the question, did our students maintain their place in the distribution across the state? And that would be meeting expected growth. Did they increase their position in the distribution, which would be exceeding expected growth? Or did they fall back in that distribution a little bit, which would be falling short or not meeting that expected growth? The way that the state's going to measure this is a 3-star is going to be, and we'll look at what some of these numbers mean, but if they have a growth index of between -2 and 2, that would mean students are meeting expected growth, which is what the state would expect. Anything with a growth index of 2 or higher is going to bump you up to that 4 stars. And when you get to that 4-star, they're also going to look at not only how statistically certain are they that students exceeded growth, but at what magnitude. And if you have a high enough magnitude, that's what would bump us up to that 5-star. But both 4 and 5 stars, there is significant evidence that students are exceeding that expected growth. So our district progress rating this year was a 4-star, which does mean that our students, there is significant evidence that they are exceeding expected growth. Our effect size, which is that second piece that the state looks at, was a 0.09. And in order to get to that 5-star, you have to have a 0.1. So again, just like last year, we are just 0.01 away from getting to that 5-star. You can also see the rating distributions for all of our schools here. This is a measure that we have some limited information for right now. In mid-October, a system called EVOS will open, and at that point, we'll be able to dig deeper into the growth data to look at not only what subjects and grade levels have maybe strong growth or areas that we want to continue to look at, but we can look more closely at subgroups of students and different types of students with diagnostic information. So this is a measure that we can kind of get a sneak peek, but mid-October is when we'll really start to dig into this with our schools to look and make kind of some action plans on how we can continue to improve. The third measure is gap closing, and this measure is intended to measure academic achievement and growth of specific subgroups of students. And there are a lot of different pieces that are included in gap closing. So this next one will be a couple of slides. Districts need at least 60% or more of their possible points in order to be rated 5 stars. We had 90.3% of our possible points. So we blew that out of the water, which was an increase of almost 10% from last year as well. This is the 4th highest gap closing in the entire state, and the 2nd highest in Central Ohio, just behind Grandview. So to look at this data a little bit more, on this slide, we're going to be looking at our ELA data. So on the left-hand side, you're going to see the English Language Arts achievement data. And the yellow dot is going to be what that state goal was. So you can see all of our bars, they're calculating a performance index for each of those individual subgroups. All of our bars far exceed what that state goal was. And when you really start to dig into it, not only the goal for this year, but many of those groups have far exceeded the long-term goal, which is the 2030-31 school year. And then on the right-hand side, there is also a gain index or growth index calculated for each of those subgroups as well. The goal in order to receive points in gap closing for growth is to have that growth index of 2 or higher. So the expectation is that students are exceeding expected growth, not just meeting. We had 7 of our 9 subgroups meet that goal of exceeding expected growth this year. We had 5 last year, so to bump that up to 7 shows some improvement. And the 2 that aren't quite there to exceeding expected growth both did have an increase in their gain index. So continue working on those. This next slide is going to show you the math data. And again, very similar to ELA. On the left-hand side, all of our students are far exceeding what that state performance index is. And on the right-hand side is going to be our math growth. You can see that yellow bar, which is the 2, is kind of that goal. And you can see how far many of those bars exceed that growth index of 2. So there's a lot of statistical certainty that those students are exceeding that growth. You don't often see gain indexes in the double digits like we're seeing here. And this is the third year in a row that all of our subgroups in math have met both of these pieces. Graduation is also included in gap closing. We can see that all of our subgroups are exceeding that goal as well. And then the measure to the right is our English learners. And so English learners are included in each of the graphs before as a subgroup looking at their achievement and growth. What this measure is looking at is how well are those students also doing acquiring the English language on their yearly test, which is called the OLPA. And so again, they're either going to look at students becoming proficient on the OLPA or meeting a growth goal from one year to the next. So the state goal right now is a little over 50%, and we are close to about 71% of our EL students meeting that. So I think an incredible thing, again, to shout out to Mr. Gully, our students are not only acquiring the English language, but they're achieving highly in math and ELA, and they're growing beyond expected growth. So they've got a great program. Gifted is another piece that's measured within the gap closing, and there are 3 pieces to the gifted. So there are up to 15 points that we can earn here. One of those is looking at the value added, so the gifted students, how are they growing? Which sometimes we hear a misconception that it's really hard to grow gifted students. our gifted students earned a 5-star, which means significant evidence that they are exceeding expected growth at a high magnitude. The goal from the state is to get a 3-star, so making sure that our gifted students are meeting expected growth. So we clearly got that with our 5-star. The second piece is a performance index. So it's going to count the scores for the students who have those gifted identifications. A max gifted performance index is calculated similar to the school and district ones. And in this case, you have to have 97.5% of that max gifted PI. And so last year we were just shy of that, and this year we're excited that we did meet that piece as well. And then the third part to this piece of the measure is looking at the identification and service for our gifted students. This is a measure that is a struggle for not only us, but a lot of districts to meet. But with our high gifted percentage, we have a lot of students who are identified, but because of the capacity of our staff, not all of those students are receiving direct service. And so that's why we're not getting, as many points. What we internally have a lot of conversations about, though, is if our students are achieving incredibly high, we're getting over 97.5% of the performance index, so their achievement is high, and they're also exceeding expected growth at a large magnitude, what that tells us is that our service model is working. That the work that our gifted specialists, our gifted department, our teachers, our community are doing, these students are not only achieving, but they're growing to their max potential as well. Oopsies. So here you can see the distribution for our schools, and all of our schools in that gap closing measure are exceeding or significantly exceeding state expectations. And this was one of the measures at the principal meeting that we really started to dig into so they could look at those specific subgroups and make some action plans as well. Next is the early literacy measure. So this is only going to apply to our elementary schools, and this is measuring our reading improvement and proficiency for kindergarten through 3rd grade. We did earn 4 stars in this measure this year, and our district percentage ranks in the top 18% of the state and the 6th in Central Ohio. There are 3 different pieces that go into this measure. So again, this is another one. On the surface seems simple, but there's a lot of data that goes behind it. One of the pieces is looking at what percentage of our students have become proficient on the ELA, or the reading portion of that ELA test. So it's looking at their reading subscore. The second piece right now is looking at how many of our students were promoted to the 4th grade. And then the third piece is what they call improving K-3 literacy. So it's looking at how many of our students who started not on track in, let's say, kindergarten, how many of them moved to on track in 1st grade to 2nd grade, and so on. That third piece of the measure is only included when you have more than 10% of your kindergartners not on track. So that is one that tends to kind of ebb and flow whether it's part of their calculation or not. This year was one of the years that it was part of that calculation for us and for about half of our school buildings. We were, again, the only district over 10,000 to earn even 4 stars, and no district over 5,700 earned that 5-star. But that is something that we're always continuing to look at. Even the thing that we can impact the most really is that proficiency on the reading portion. Here's the distribution for our schools. We had 6 schools who significantly exceeded state standards, 6 that exceeded state standards, but overall, all of our schools are at least meeting state standards in that early literacy measure. Graduation, which is probably the most straightforward of all of the components, is looking at both the 4-year and the 5-year graduation rate. And all of this data is lagged. So the 4-year graduation rate is based on our class of 2024, and then our 5-year is based on our class of 2023. And they are weighted a little bit heavier, 60% for the 4-year, 40% for the 5-year. Our district had a weighted graduation rate of 98.9%, and all of our schools were at 98.4% or higher. Actually, our 4-year graduation rate for the class of 2024 was 99%, which is incredible. And then the final component, and another relatively complicated one and the first time that this one is rated, but the intention of this measure is to look at how well prepared our students are for future opportunities. And there are 11 different ways that students can demonstrate readiness. And you can see those. I know it's a little bit small here, but the blue bars or any of those measures that have the asterisks on them. But they include being remediation free on an ACT, SAT, earning an honors diploma, scoring 3 or higher on at least 3 AP tests, earning 12 or more industry credentials in a single career field, earning 12 or more credits through CCP, enlisting in the military, completing a pre-apprenticeship, being accepted into an apprenticeship post-high school, completing an apprenticeship, achieving proficiency on 3 or more technical assessments, or earning the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal and completing 250 hours of work-based learning. So as long as students fall into one of these categories, they will fall into the numerator of this calculation. Students can only be counted once. So if a student meets 4 of those, they're still only going to count 1 time in the numerator. So then we divide by the 4-year graduation class, and that's where we got our 71.3%, which was an increase of 1.5% from last year. A couple things to note, this is a pretty complicated measure that includes a lot of different reporting elements. Some are more straightforward with the credits, honors diplomas, those types of thing, but a lot of them also are very closely related to some specific EMIS reporting that is still kind of being ironed out across the state. I was actually on a webinar that was over 2 hours the other day that everyone's really trying to grasp to make sure that we're capturing all of the things that our students are doing. We do expect to see this continue to grow, and it's something that we're looking at to make sure that we are not only reporting correctly all of the opportunities that our students are participating in, but then also identifying those students who might not fall into one of those buckets, and are there additional opportunities that we can provide for them. So for example, our Teacher Academy program is now considered a pre-apprenticeship. So we're going to start to see some students who are going to fall into that pre-apprenticeship bucket that we never have before. Also, our marketing program at the high schools, they are participating in work-based learning, so we're probably going to start to see some of those students with the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal and 250 hours of work-based learning. So we do have access to files right now for the class of 2025, so we're starting to dig into those to make sure everything's reported correctly and identifying any future opportunities. And then the school information, we can see that one of our schools exceeded state standards in post-secondary readiness, but all of our schools at least met that measure. So that is what I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions? You look like
Who
you
wants
could-
to start? Yeah, I feel like we all.
Did you, I didn't catch this, with the college career workforce and military readiness in comparison to similar districts and size or neighboring districts in Central Ohio? Do we have?
I would say 3. There's a couple who have creeped into the 4-star, but most are right around that 3-star, kind of in the 70 or like early 70%. In order to get to 4 stars, it's 75%. So we're not too far from that. I can look at those rankings specifically,
Just
but
curious.
yeah.
Okay.
I know that you said you would get more data in October, but do you have a sense of the big leap in the math growth? I think that's something that's really stood out to me because I think people have been, very concerned about the math stagnation or going back due to the COVID learning loss, I suppose, is the best way to put it. But so I know it's been a concern sort of generally and in our district specifically. I know that's why we converted some teachers to math specialists to help coach and things like that. So how much do you think, what do you think all played into that necessarily, that big growth this year?
Yeah, I think math has been a strong growth point for us in general, but I think that, we had implementation of bridges that we're really looking at how we can measure the effectiveness of that. But I also think that having those dedicated professionals as math specialists in the building are really helping to, we've had the literacy for a while, but it's helping identify what really are those best practices and making sure that they're more consistent and allowing us to really dig into that individual student and differentiation. Mm-hmm.
Well, people have told me I need to keep it brief tonight. So I'm going to save most of my stuff for the treasurer, but I'm looking at over time the PI trend, and I know we were just coming out of COVID and everything took a hit, and I think one year we didn't even have numbers, right? We didn't even have a performance index. But I'm looking at a 5-year trend that's going up 15, 18% over the 5 years. That's really hard to do. Mm-hmm. So I applaud the district just for that, under your leadership, to do that. But it's just like the Yankees or the Patriots. Sometimes you don't win the Super Bowl by enough. Or we went to 6 games to win the World Series. So we have an added responsibility of like you said, of growing kids that are achieving on the highest ends of the spectrum of what we're doing. So the thing that overwhelms me, I just want people to understand this, that we have more kids scoring at advanced and accelerated than we do proficient. That's unbelievable. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, and I'll just piggyback on that a little bit. I looked at the number, and you've hit on this a little bit, but I looked at the numbers of the 47 schools that were 5-star districts, and 26 of them, the entire district is about the size of one of our high schools or smaller, right? More than half of them are basically one of our high schools. And of those 47, only 5 had more than 5,000 students, and we're the only one over 10, and we're 24,000, right? I don't think people realize how incredibly difficult this is to do it at scale, right? It is it's not that there are bad districts, in these, we're looking at some of our neighbors, Dublin, great school system, right? A big school system, and, they're not there. There's, other ones around there that are really good schools that are not there. Doing this, getting these results and doing it at that level with that many students is not easy to do. It's not just because parents are involved here, right? There are a lot of parents involved at a lot of other school districts. It takes a lot of intentional effort. So it's the work of this team every single day to get there. It's just incredible.
I think the key question is that we ask Mr. Meyer all the time, what more can we do to support your efforts? And that's the question. And I feel like we're providing everything we can to Mr. Meyer to do what we've hired him to do, which is just simply be the best for our kids. No one's moved here to just be average.
Right.
I mean, you tell me, what else can we give you? I mean, is there something your wish list? I mean,
and I say
How much time do we have?
yeah. Now I say this all the time. I mean, the support that we have from the board level in supporting the mission of the district goes a long, long way. We have all 5 board members sitting in the seats for the right reason, and that's to support the organization. So we are providing the best student experience that we can provide in our school environments. And Mr. Lester's right. This does not happen by accident. We have really, really good people in the district, and I say it all the time. We're very intentional and thoughtful on our approach to instruction and how we instruct and what we instruct. So I'm just extremely proud of the results that we continue to get. And Mrs. Brunswick said at the beginning, one of our core values, we can always get better, and people really believe that here. And because they believe that, they want to show up every day and be present for our kids. So that shows in the results. And it's, obviously I'm extremely proud, and we have a lot of really, really good people in the organization. So it does start at the board level. And so, for me, extremely grateful for the support that you do provide and the advocacy that you provide for public education. And, going back to the bond issue and what we need facility-wise to continue to accommodate the growth to ensure that we continue to provide that type of experience is extremely important for us.
Yeah.
I talked to my daughter's her math teacher this morning, and this is what every teacher that I've ever experienced has done. He said, I always stay after if kids have questions, and you don't find that everywhere. He said, I always have time to give to the child that has extra questions, and that's not an outlier, and that's what makes a difference. So thank you for leading that team.
Great. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, Mr. Meyer, Superintendent's report.
All right, well, so I get to follow that great news, and I do have to tell a story. We've had principal meetings last week, and I for sure hugged Mr. Golly, or I don't know if I hit him or, just, I've really recognized him this week, and Ms. Schreiber talked about EL at the beginning. It's just, again, going back to just when you drill down to subgroups, right? And with our EL students and the growth that we're seeing with the EL students, but Mr. Golly is an educator who is in education for the right reasons, and he shows up here every single day, and believe me, he doesn't want recognition. He does not want the recognition, but he does a really, really good job. And I can go on and on. Our students with disabilities and how well they achieve, and again, how intentional we are with how we support students with disabilities and their families. It's unbelievable. And again, I always say we're not perfect, right? We're not perfect, and but we have that continuous improvement mindset where we can get better, and again, people are here for the right reasons. So academically, we knocked it out of the park, absolutely. So I'm going to recognize a few other things quickly in my superintendent report, but first I want to recognize this is our first professional development day, and you've heard me say this a few times. You show me a school, a district where the adults are learning, and I'll show you a school, a district where students are learning, and it's so true. So this is part of our intentionality within our district and our alignment. We have 3 focused professional development days each year, and we just don't one day create what we're doing. I mean, it is, again, intentional, thoughtful. Our curriculum department is the best around. We get a lot of feedback on what we're going to do. So first one, September 15th, great success. So you can just see, and again, one thing, we always collect feedback because we always want to get better. So from our staff, implementation, 91% of the staff agreed or strongly agreed they left with at least one strategy or tool to apply immediately. And again, in action. Right? Not just sitting there all day, but in action, they can take away. Collaboration, 96% agreed or strongly agreed collaboration was effectively supported. That, again, I don't want that to go unnoticed because that's probably sometimes the best professional development as far as conditions that we can provide for our staff where they can sit down with colleagues and collaborate. Relevance, 88% agreed that the day's learning aligned with the teaching needs and building goals. Again, us as a district supporting what you need as a teacher in the classroom. So again, great job with our curriculum team, our principals, and staff who executed the first day of professional development.
Mr. Meyer, can I ask a quick
Yeah.
question on that
Yep.
last one? Those numbers look great. What about response rate? How are we in?
Oh, yeah, I have response rate.
I'm just curious to ensure that we're getting.
1,125 staff members provided feedback, so that's a
Okay.
lot. So response rate is really, really good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention that. They put that in my notes, and I forgot to mention that, but great question. As soon as you said it, I said, it's right here.
You're becoming predictable.
Also want to recognize, again, this is outside of academics, because we talk about the school experience. And so last week, Olentangy students celebrated Start With Hello Week. So spreading kindness, building connections, and ensuring everyone feels included. So here's just some pictures. And I love the pic. I mean, basically the smiles, they say it all to me. But there's just a lot of meaningful activities that go on in our schools on a daily basis to promote kindness for sure and to create inclusive environments. Mr. Lester mentioned this, Bridging the Future, great success, and this continues to build momentum. And Ms. Preston said it the best, we're just scratching the surface here in Olentangy with our Bridge Ed program and the opportunities that we're providing for students and families. So initially, 716 students, families, and staff and community members RSVP'd for the event. We had 12 partners who participated. You know, I want to say probably 500 plus showed up that night. But you think about access, awareness, and understanding. So I don't know, 10 years ago, we used to always hear about access from business and industry into the K-12 space. So we've opened up that access and provided access for students and staff to the businesses industries, but also business and industry into our schools. So we're going to continue to do that. And really, a big goal is to create awareness for students and parents of opportunities that are out there as far as the different pathways and to understand those different pathways. So extremely proud of the work that Ms. Preston's doing with Bridge Ed and our curriculum team, and we're going to continue to fine tune and, again, at the end of the day, provide opportunities for students and families. One thing I want to mention from that night, because Lieutenant Governor was great, Lieutenant Governor Tressel, he's always really, really good, but One Columbus was there also. And we talk about this in our district as far as the growth. But when you look at the macro level, and again, One Columbus talked about the economic region in Central Ohio is really, really strong. And because the economic region is really strong, businesses want to come here or businesses want to expand. So when that happens, families move here. And when they move to Central Ohio, they go to communities that have good schools. Hence Olentangy. So, you know, we're very, a lot of families move here because of the schools. So that's at the macro level. And it's part of the growth that we experience here in Olentangy.
What I would just note is, you know, we had some of our local representatives, whether it's from other local entities or state representatives that are there. I think it's a moment for the state to take note of what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Because we are, as you just said, we are a driver economically for this area, not just for, you know, just people moving here, but we're helping out employers by doing this sort of thing. We're providing these services well above and beyond what school districts are expected to do. And it's important for the state to recognize that and support us with funding. And we made that point to, you know, to the representatives that were there, that this is exactly why you invest in public schools, and especially Olentangy.
Absolutely. And I heard this, I'll say pre-K-12 is the pipeline for workforce development, public education. And I was, Representative Lorenz was at the event, and I was right in his ear and connected it right back to school funding. Because again, I'll remind, every additional dollar we get from the state is one less dollar we have to ask from our local property owner. So absolutely, every chance that I get, that we get, we're having conversations about that. Also want to highlight, this is first ever. So a few years ago, we created our Alumni Association. So in collaboration with the Olentangy Education Foundation, this was our inaugural Legends of Olentangy awards night. So we had 3 honorees, and these honorees were all nominated by community members, and we looked at the applications, and these 3 community service award winner was Beverly McDaniel, a 1984 OHS graduate, and who also works in food service at Alum Creek. How many years at Alum Creek? 30 years?
Yeah,
But
it was a lot.
it was a great honor. Young Alumni Achievement Award winner, Allie Ritter, 2015 OHS graduate, who works for Elford and really does a lot with advocating for women in engineering. Got to honor her that night. And then Distinguished Alumni Award winner Jerry Klein, 1965 Olentangy School graduate, and also served on the Board of Education for 8 or 9 years, right?
8 years, he
8
told
years?
me, yeah.
And so and I'll remember this because he and I are going to have coffee, because we're going to go back way back in history, because he's seen all the growth. But when he sat on the board back in 1989, they just started getting into the enrollment projections at that time. So back then, they projected in 2020 Olentangy to have 20,000 students. And I think we were right about there. And back then, they were like, you're crazy, right? And again, almost spot on. So it was just a great night, very intimate in the Olentangy High School theater with their family and friends there to celebrate the recognition. So that was fun. That was neat. So looking forward to many, many more years of doing that. Also, then I got to leave that night, Olentangy High School, and I went to a community event, Berlin High School, where Orange played Berlin. But halftime was phenomenal, and the reason why is because we had the Orange Band and Berlin Band combined to play on the field together. And I think they played two do you call them songs in the march? You make two tunes. But so that was great. And then they included the Berkshire and Berlin Middle School 8th grade band members to join them for 2 more songs, right? So I think 500 students on the field, great community event, great environment, weather was perfect, they had a lot of fun, stands were packed, parents were taking a lot of pictures, they sounded great, it was awesome. So it was just a great experience, and just want to thank Directors Boyer and Reeves. So Boyer's at Orange High School, and then Reeves is at Berlin High School anyways, for coordinating that and putting that together. So that was really, really cool. So with that, superintendent action items. So we have 4 retirements. We have a couple student clubs that I'm recommending, and then in the business management facility items, declare transportation as impractical. And as promised at the last meeting, we're asking the board to approve 12 new buses, so 9 71-passenger buses and then 3 lift buses. And again, for $1.7 million, this is part of our capital plan and part of our replacement cycle for school buses that we purchase every year. I do want to say retirements, because I say this all the time. So collectively, the 4 retirees, 90 years of service, 90 total years of service for Olentangy schools, students, and families. So for sure want to thank them for their service. New this year, what we're going to do is we're going to recognize our retirees at a board meeting 2 times during the year. So end of first semester, beginning of second semester, and again at the end of the school year. So with that, one more slide, important dates coming up. We talked a lot about community conversations, so you can see we still have quite a few here in the next couple weeks. And then we will be back, we will be at Olentangy Liberty High School on October 16th. So we're going to do a student recognition that night. So we will be at 6:30 at Olentangy Liberty on the 16th. So any questions?
All right.
Or are you going to save them for Ryan, Mr. Jenkins? Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr.
All
Meyer.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jenkins, you've been forewarned that it's coming.
Heard Mr. Meyer say great success several times, and I kept looking around for Borat.
Oh, man.
What'd you say?
Great success. Look it up.
Or don't.
Not on the school computer.
Exactly.
Oh, my God.
So this evening, I wanted to present how terrible, that says May of 2025. That should obviously say October of 2025. The financial forecast presentation, no longer called 5-year, because with the House Bill 96 biennium budget, recall that what we're going to be forecasting is the current fiscal year that we're in, so 25-26, and 3 subsequent fiscal years. So we're technically cutting 1 year off of it. What we are going to continue to focus on here at Olentangy, though, is the way it's always been done. We're going to look out the 5 years, all the way to 29-30. What will happen is when I submit it, that last year will obviously be truncated and cut off. So what I'm trying to do is provide as high a level view as possible. So what I want to look at tonight are the forecast at a glance, a summary view right from the start, the general fund revenues, which for our district are almost all predominantly made up of real estate funding, and then state funding would be the second source, even though it's not nearly as large as our real estate funding. And then finally, the salaries and benefits make up the largest of our expenditures, and we always concentrate and look at our staffing growth. The forecast at a glance shows some challenges for sure. This fiscal year, we're going to deficit spend right now. The forecast is by about $24.5 million. Now, we had a deficit forecasted last year, but it was a deficit of between $3 to $4 million, which on a $500 million budget, technically our general fund is a $380 million budget. A swing of a couple $1 million is, not that much. I bring that up because a swing of $25 million is probably not likely. We could see it get better. Maybe it becomes, instead of a $25 million deficit, it's a $10 to $15 million deficit. But my sense tells me that we've truly now crossed that threshold of, I just don't see the forecast getting $24.5 million better between now and the end of the fiscal year. When deficits begin, they kind of grow exponentially. So you can see that next year's deficit of $42.9 million and a subsequent year, $71.9 million, rounded to 72. In any year where your deficit exceeds, or beg your pardon, your expenditures exceed your revenue, you're eroding your cash balance. So the cash balance then is line 7.020, and then the handy bar graph at the bottom shows how much cash we have on hand. Right now we would be forecasting to end the 26-27 school year with 77 days cash. We would end the 27-28 school year with 14 days cash. That's not really tenable. So by process of elimination, you can kind of figure that if I was a betting man and I was told to put my stakes on when it would be, you're talking somewhere in the 27-28 time frame for when we would have to seek operations, and we'll talk about that in a subsequent slide. So a different viewpoint shows that where you're kind of in the shades of green, you have revenue surplus, and 23-24 we had surpluses. 2025 is a bit of an anomaly. Remember, at the end of last year we transferred $50 million because of the clawback. But for that $50 million transfer last year, we pretty much would have broken even, about a $3 million surplus. But then you can see we're in the kind of warning zone where our shortfall is greater than 2%. Next year, we kind of start to stray into the red areas where the shortfall exceeds 8%. And then by the time we get to 27-28, the shortfall is pretty significant. So now let's switch to revenue. Our revenue is not in a situation where it's not growing. So when we do a financial forecast, I don't want to be so conservative that you just flatline revenue. That is not realistic. What we'll see is it doesn't grow as fast as expenses. Our proportion of funding is 69%, as you can see, local taxes. And I like to say the 5-point, I believe that is 8%. That is the state share of local property taxes. Remember, the state of Ohio kicks in 12.5% of our residential real estate bills. Our residents get a 12.5% credit that is picked up by the state of Ohio. That became law in the late 70s when Ohio began assessing an income tax. That's part of an offset that was a part of that deal. Unfortunately, though, that 12.5% no longer applies to any levy passed after November of 2013. So you can see the other more nominal features are state sources, obviously including that 5.8%. That is a credit to our local community. And then finally, all other revenues. The biggest proportion of all other revenues, we will book most of our pilots, our TIF payments, or CRA payments in that area. In some ways, that's a type of local real estate revenue. In order to keep track of it, though, we book it to all of the revenues.
Can we stay on revenue for a second? Looks a little light on the state end. A few years ago, we were talking about what could our revenue models look like if the state held to its promise of fair school funding fully implemented. So we get through the first two budgets, we love where the train is going, and then they pull the rug out and we don't have fair school funding, we don't have cost sets. What would we get from the state if they would have kept their promise to fully implement fair school funding? Or in other words, how much did it cost our community? Because if you make that blue a little bit bigger, that green gets smaller, right?
Correct.
So every penny that we get from the state is tax relief for our neighbors that we've already paid to the state. What did it cost us when they voted to eliminate fair school funding?
So I believe I ran a scenario in the spring, and if they had funded fair school funding, updated the cost sets, which was the biggest piece of that, in this biennium budget alone, I want to say it was going to this biennium budget, plus if you assume that level of funding moving forward, it was going to add close to $50 million to the forecast by the 29-30 school year.
So 7 or 8 mills.
Correct.
That they cut out from us. Now, so they used old cost sets. What was it, 22 or 21?
2022.
So I just want consistency and intellectual honesty. Do we know, Mr. Gordon, sorry, what cost sets do they use for school facilities? Do they use 21 cost sets?
No, the updated manually is 25 this year.
So they use it to build buildings, but they don't use it to fund the buildings that they're, okay,
That's correct.
more to come.
And the law codified 2022 EMIS data as the cost of a teacher, a principal, the cost of extracurricular programming. All of the inputs that go into computing base cost are at this point in time close to 4 years old, and by the end of the biennium, be about 5 or 6 years old. And the effect of that, that's a good question, is when you use the old cost sets for every school, not just Olentangy, but for every school in the state, it shifts more of the burden locally. Because at the same time that the formula holds the cost sets constant, it renews and updates every year the local property wealth factors. So not trying to be terribly critical, but just simply stating a fact that the school funding formula has frozen the cost of the state's inputs to values that are 4 or 5 years old, while for every community across the state of Ohio, it assumes the growth in property valuation and local incomes are current. I find that a little bit ironic, given our recent reports that we've seen from the Ohio Education Policy Institute that show in the last 30 to 40 years the split between residential and commercial property taxes were pretty close to 50-50. And they're now much, much closer to 70-30, 70% being tilted towards residential. And this is an example of a policy decision that certainly is one that probably ought to be discussed a little bit more deeply. If you're going to continue to say that the local wealth factors are going to be current at the same time you're holding the cost factors to 5 and 6 years old, you are tilting every single year that the formula is in existence more and more cost towards local communities.
It's hard to crawl out of that hole. Because once you continue to compound that, then you see 5-year forecasts. Stand corrected. 3-year forecasts. So I guess the idea would be then if we close the window of how far we look ahead, the problem's not that bad anymore, right? It's like if we only maybe look a week or two ahead, we really don't even have any problems.
It certainly felt like in some respects that, when we made the assertion that as we look at 5-year models, we have deep concerns. I'm not sure that many treasurers around the state asked for the 5-year model to be turned into a 3 or a 4-year model. So I'm not sure what the motivation for that was, but I heard some people say, hey, by the time you get 4 and 5 years out, it's all a guess anyway. Well, I hope not. It's not a guess. There's a method to it. Is there fluctuation? Are there variances? Well, of course. But it's not like when you're trying to forecast 4 and 5 years out that you just kind of stick your finger to the wind to see which way it's blowing. So our revenue changes, as you can see, if you want to just go to the bottom, it's not as if we're not forecasting revenues to grow. Our total average annual change will be about 2.11% per year, about $8.2 million. It's about $17 million less, though, than the historical 5-year run. Well, what caused the historical 5-year run to be that high? We passed an operating levy in 2020. By the time this financial forecast cycle is done, we will not have passed a levy since May of 2020 when it comes to operational levies. And we will have gone potentially 7, 8, 9 years without new operational dollars. So it's reflective in the fact that your real estate average annual change is $13 million. That's because you were still in that historical 5-year period of time experiencing the residual changes that came with that additional levy. So at no point across this particular forecast cycle have I yet ventured into calculating operating levies, but I'm going to explain in just a few minutes why that's probably inevitable. So real estate revenue, it's important to point out, I know that we spend a lot of time explaining to our community as values increase, voted tax rates decrease. So I included this chart so that you can see. Now you'll notice in 25, 27, and 28, there's nominal, absolutely nominal decreases in millage. But then you'll see a much bigger chunk in 26 and in 29. And that matches exactly what we're going to talk about later in this presentation. You have a triennial update coming up in 2026. That's where the auditor will use data and computer analytics. Won't actually go out and visit each house physically, but we'll use market data to do some updates. Then 3 years later in 2029, the auditor will do just what they did in 2023. They will physically go out and literally inspect every property in the county. I don't have any idea how they get that done, but they do it. So what you see with property valuation are stair steps. And in the 2 years in between a triennial update and a reappraisal, home values don't change. The only way they change is if someone files a Board of Revision complaint where they ask to have their property revalued and reassessed by what's called the Board of Revision. It's a three-member panel that is the auditor, county treasurer, and the county prosecutor. So real estate revenue, again, historically was at about $13 million. That reflected the levy that we passed in 2020 because it took 2 fiscal years for that to ramp up. But at this point in time, those average increases are going to taper off, and the $6.7 million per year is going to be due mainly to the new properties and the small amount of inside millage. Remember, inside millage does not decrease with value. So then as our state funding revenue, this slide, I realize there's a lot of words, but the biggest piece that I want you to look at is right in the middle, where it talks about calculates payments of a district's current enrolled ADM. This is our biggest supplement that we're getting in the current funding formula, and we're thankful for it. But I'm going to show you why we're thankful for this. So we're getting about $250 per pupil. I think I'm using actually the House bill version here. I need to update this slide because the Senate actually landed a little bit different, even though the premise is the same. The numbers are a little bit different. I want to say we're at $250 per pupil. So because of our growth, we get that extra bonus. Then we also get a per pupil funding supplement, and then we also get an amount of money added for our performance on the report card. It's critical that those things were thrown in, though, because of this next slide. If it weren't for those supplements, our base cost is going to stay right around $8,000 per pupil, but the state's contribution towards that base cost has gone down to the statutory minimum, and that's about 10%. So this particular biennium budget absolutely has those supplements. We get a supplement for performance on a grade card, we get a supplement for growth, and then there's just a flat supplement that they're given of $27, I think, per pupil to every pupil in the state. Without those supplements, we would have the lowest per pupil funding that we've had historically in the district when you consider inflationary factors.
Are those those supplements guaranteed year over year? I know the 2-year budget, but I'm talking about in the next budget. Can we count on that? Can we?
So they're not in the law currently. I have to assume and make some assumptions. So my assumptions in future funding beyond these 2 years would be that something is there, because if not, then our funding would drop, at $800 per pupil. That would be a pretty catastrophic change to the forecast.
But we've been there before.
We have. So when you put it all together, it causes our funding in fiscal year '26 to be relatively stable. Would like to have seen it increase a little more than that. But then as we move forward, again, as noted by Dr. Dabrico, I am keeping a type of funding per pupil at our current level of around $1,500 to $1,600. It will be critical, absolutely critical, that we stay there. If the state abandons the supplements and goes back to $800, that will be a pretty bad development for us as a district. Questions on revenue?
I don't think that people, we were talking about this earlier, relative to operating levies, I don't think people really understand that there's the millage reduction factor that goes along with it. They think more people moving in, therefore we get more money, so why do we need more money? And it's that challenge of that House Bill 920 that reduces the effective millage so that we are, we're capped at whatever level that was, and yet our expenses are going up and up and up, and we'll continue to see this. It's just an incredible challenge when the state doesn't recognize that our it's great that we get these small little amounts of money. They help keep us from completely drowning. But it's not sustainable over time, as we've seen here, when it's not that we're spending extravagantly, we're spending less than the average school district. We're doing our part in this. It's just that we are capped at how much we can get from these operating levies, and the state isn't chipping in.
That's correct. And that's the way the law was written almost 50 years ago in the late 70s. Some of the, fuss, if you lack of a better word, around the state, there are a lot of schools that have hit the 20 mil floor. And so what you just noted, Mr. Lester, for those schools isn't quite as true, but for districts like Olentangy, increases in valuation only serve to drive down the tax rate, which is exactly how the law was intended to work, so that there's not a bunch of unfunded tax increases. But it puts limitations, certainly, on your revenues being able to keep up with expenses, that's for sure. So on the expense side, it's a pretty straightforward story. Our salaries and benefits are 81% of what we do. We're a people business. It's that simple. There's a lot of things we can do, and we do, to gain efficiencies in places like what we purchase on supplies and capital. We're talking today about how we do everything we can to minimize our energy use footprint. But when it all boils down to it, as a district, we are a district of people. And that is our primary thing, is obviously service to students in our community. So when you look at our expense changes, historical and projected, the anomaly is other uses. I'm going to point that out. Remember, at the end of the year last year, I'll point this out one more time, we transferred $50 million as a one-time transfer. That is skewing that average. But what I want you to think of is, if you look at the other numbers, kind of don't look at other uses, but look at the other numbers, they give you a better idea that historically we've gone about $14.6 million per year changes in salaries. We're obviously forecasting closer to 18 now. Benefits, on average, about $5 million increase per year, and now it's closer to 8. And those are the two principal sources of our expenses as we continue to forecast the growth we have in students and the staff that we're going to need to add to keep up with it.
So before you move on, would it make sense to balance the books to use this notion called zero-based budgeting? Could we just scrap the whole system and just start over and use the model of zero-based budgeting to just cut bazillions of dollars and then the budget would balance?
The budget might balance, but at what cost? Zero-based budgeting starts from the premise that everything you do must have a detailed justification before you add a single thing. And that sounds really, really good, and it is something that we do to a point. But to say every year to a building your staffing starts at zero, and you have to now justify every staff member that you have to teach the 625 kids that are in your building. So no, zero-based budgeting is generally not a long-term sustainable type of budgeting technique. It's real, it exists, but it doesn't, in my opinion, it values dollars and cents to such an extreme that you could reach absurd conclusions about what's best for kids.
Do they usually scrap systems that are high-performing?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know why you would take a district that performs as well as we do, that's as efficient with what, as we are with our resources, and reach the conclusion that a massive overhaul needs made. We can always get better. Mr. Meyer always notes that. We always strive to get better. But we like to say that we are public education in many ways done right.
To that end, though, sometimes when there are efficiencies, we take advantage of that, right? Like I've heard of people retiring and not backfilling certain positions because, those could be absorbed by other people or things like that. So to say that we don't do any sort of assessment, I think would also be inaccurate.
Yeah, since 2020, we've saved about $50.2 million. But as I've said, standing here probably within the last meeting or two, I want to be clear that that doesn't mean our expenses have gone backwards. When you grow like we grow, our expenses won't go backwards. Nobody in life, whose expenses go backwards, it's not normal. What we're saying is that we're doing everything we can to keep that rate of growth as low as we can. And that $50.2 million represents additional expenses that our community would have incurred but for our efforts. So absolutely, we are stringently watching everything that we do to try to become more and more efficient. And we'll talk more about that later.
And I think, to your point, in our staffing detail, we look at that every single year, multiple times, but for sure 2 times a year. And we're not filling positions just to fill them. We're filling them because we need them. And I think in that 51 million, I think cost avoidance, a little over 5 million in personnel.
Yep.
Of avoided costs because we didn't fill positions. So
But to your-
it's certainly that we definitely look at that.
Yeah, but I think to the overarching point, as we grow as a district, we need more teachers, lunch staff, bus drivers,
Yeah.
all that stuff to serve all our students.
Yes,
We're not going to
absolutely.
have 60 kids in one classroom or,
correct.
4 kids to a seat on a school bus kind of thing. Like, we just have to adjust and adapt to the growth that we have.
Yeah, and what's in the forecast is district growth. We'll talk in a minute. I'll get to a slide. We've gotten a question along the lines of, for your bond issue, are you going to build these buildings and then not have the money to operate them? And the answer to that is an emphatic no. We know as a district that the growth that we have, we will ultimately have to come back to our residents to fund the district. But it's not like somehow these 2 buildings weren't thought out and, oh, wow, we never thought about that. We're not going to be able to operate them. That is not at all how it works. We've got built into this model, whether the 2 buildings are built or not, we have to keep up and make sure that we have adequate space for our kids, adequate teachers to put in front of them. All of those things have to keep happening.
And this isn't just because we love hiring people. This is state law. There's state law that requires X amount of teachers per child, so we're not making this up as we go. Personnel expenses, I want to flesh this out a little bit more. Student-teacher ratios, people talk a lot about. I'll never forget a few years ago, someone was pushing back about our student ratios, and they were from somewhere, a different country. And they said, well, I don't know why you just don't put them up to about 40 students per kid, because I grew up in X country and we had 40, and I'm like, 40 kids a classroom. Let's talk more personnel expenses with administration, because you have to say it over and over again. Our numbers, and we have two metrics that we can go off of. We have one for central office and one for total. Am I saying it right?
Correct.
What do those look like?
Central office, we're below 6%. The state.
What was the sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the state recently passed a law that said your central office administrative expenses must be less than 15%. We're at 5.7.
Yeah, a little over 5.
If you look at our all-in admin cost, everything that's administrative, it's 9.5%. So our total administrative cost is almost 5 percentage points, a little more than that, 5.5 percentage points below what the state targets just for central office.
So when you say 5 percentage points, I take issue with that, because it's not 5%, it's like 30% less, right? And so 5% seems like, I mean, maybe I can get my carpet for 5% less. But when you talk about 30%, that's a lot of people. If you hired to fill that up and went from 5.7 to 8.7, you're talking about doubling.
Yes.
Almost. So, yeah, that's huge.
And we actually reduced by 1% from last year to this year administratively. So I think it was 10.5 to 9.5 or
right.
10.6 to.
And that's why you get your 75 point whatever percent.
It was almost a mirror, inverse of each other. We went up nearly a percentage point in instructional expenditures. We went down a percentage point in administrative.
There's a formula there.
I really caution people once we start talking about this, because numbers look massive, right? We're a big district. The numbers, our budget is bigger than New Albany's, right? Because we're a much bigger school district. This is why I really like to look at the per student expenditures, because it really shows apples to apples of how much you're spending. And that's where, these cost avoidance strategies, we look at them and it's like, okay, again, not to pick on Dublin here, but Dublin's like 18,500 and we're like 16,000, right? I mean, that's a massive amount of money when you multiply it out. $2,500 times 24,000 students. It's a massive, massive amount of money. So I hope that people don't just sort of look at these numbers and go, oh my gosh, there's all this expenses. When you look at what other people are spending proportionately, if they were as big as us, these numbers would be off the charts.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, our expenditure per pupil, and this is 23-24 data, because 24-25 data is still being honed, we're even less than the state average.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was $16,019 per pupil, and the state average was closer to $16,500. And then if you look at us compared to the biggest schools in the state, your Columbus, your Cleveland, your Cincinnati's, they're well in excess of $22,000, $23,000 per pupil.
Right.
Yeah, without the outcomes that we
Correct.
have. And I mean, aren't we the second largest employer in Delaware County?
Yes.
I mean,
I think
so-
only Chase is bigger than us.
Yeah.
So on the, I guess, you can see here projected increases by about 18 million, which we covered just a minute ago. On the benefit side, projected increases of about 8 million. This is another area where we try to be very, very diligent. We work exceptionally hard with our insurance committee. Our premiums for our health care, for our dental, we work exceptionally hard to try to keep those things in line. Right now, a lot of public schools are having a rough year when it comes to renewals. We'll talk about our renewal at our October board meeting. We've met with our insurance committee. We know what those are. I'll be bringing those forward. But that's a pretty big expense. I mean, I think people would be stunned to know that we are spending close to $50 million a year just on healthcare claims. That's our self-insured healthcare fund. What's also in this benefit expense are salary-driven fringes like Medicare and STRS. What do I mean by salary-driven fringe? Well, for every additional dollar, you're going to have a fringe benefit that's also driven. 14% of that dollar is going to go to retirement, an additional 1.45% goes to Medicare. These are the assumptions driving the forecast moving forward. The 25-26 school year is at 2.5%. This is all part of the agreement that we have with all of our major associations, 3% for the next 2 school years. And then in the out year, I don't have an exact number, but right now I'm forecasting 2.5. That is a number that obviously can change. It is a number that I would say needs to be there because pretending like wage inflation is going to be 0 is not realistic. So I start with a number so that if need be, we can talk about, okay, fine, if we want to talk about a raise being different than 2.5%, where will it come from? Because that's what's baked into the budget. That's what we're planning for. So that's why I think it's critical to not do zero-based budgeting, speaking to what you were talking about earlier, Dr. Dabrico, saying that there will be 0%. I've been in this business now for close to 30 years, 20 to 21 of that as a treasurer, and I can count on my hand the 0 times I've ever been in a school district where there hasn't been at least a nominal 1 to 2% increase. I think maybe when Senate Bill 5 was a big deal back in 2012, there were a few districts that led with a 0%. I'm not saying it's not possible, I'm just saying it's not real probable. And so this kind of wraps up what we're expecting. The left-hand vertical axis is the staffing numbers. The right-hand vertical axis goes with the green line, and that's enrollment. You can see it is a stacked column, so your orange are forecasted FTEs for certified teachers, gray would be classified staff, and then the mustard-colored part of the bar would be administrative. We clip right along. I mean, look at the enrollment at the bottom. There's just a constant, steady flow of between 300, 400, 500 students a year into the foreseeable future. And it's been that way, what, for 25 years? So the final thing I'll wrap up with the 5-year forecast, financial forecast. We've gotten a lot of questions that basically say what I alluded to earlier. I'll bet that you're not thinking ahead, and because there's no operating levy with the bond issue, you're going to end up in a position to where you can't open the buildings. We're going to open the buildings. What I'm trying to show here is that if I were to take out and make adjustments to staffing, so first of all, when we open a new building, that does not mean we need from head to toe a new employee in every role. A high school would have in our district between probably 160 to 200 staff members. We don't have to hire 200 brand new staff members at a high school. A lot of teachers move around or shift. A lot of other roles move around and shift. You do have to hire a new administrator, new administrative team. You typically have to hire some intervention specialists, a new custodial staff. So you're not hiring from head to toe a brand new set of employees. I would put that estimate at probably 20 to 25% of a building would be new based on what I just covered, those types of employment areas where you do actually have to go out and get some new people. Let's say I back those folks out. You can see it makes a difference in our forecast, but the difference is nominal to the point of essentially immaterial and irrelevant. Right now as a district, I would target, in order for our district to continue to operate effectively, in order for us to continue to meet the needs of all students, not just to open 2 buildings, we know in the calendar year 2027, calendar year 2028, operational funding is going to be needed. By that point in time, if that timing is exactly true, it will have been 7 to 8 years since we had our last operating levy pass. That's a pretty long period of time.
If the state changed course and decided to fully fund this, would that revenue line help us a little there?
If the state were to change course and do some different things, it could help immensely. It sure could. It absolutely
So the more we
could.
get from the state could keep us off the ballot longer.
That will stay true forever. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, the more that we're able to get increased state funding, the better it is for our local residents. Questions about the forecast?
I just have an announcement, so we don't typically do this, but if anybody has a gray Subaru, lights are on in the parking lot. I guess we've been here for a while, so I don't know if anybody has a gray Subaru, but I just got a message, lights are on.
I thought you were going to say your pizza's here.
That sounds good.
No one's getting up.
Pizza.
Nobody's getting up, so
There's a parent training.
Yes.
30 minutes ago.
I used to do that when I was high school principal sometimes, and I had to get on the PA, but anyways,
We did our best.
yeah, we did.
So I've got some slides on Know the Facts. There have been several questions that have come up that I'm going to try to address today. It's the best way I know to try, at this point in time, every way that I can think of to help the community understand what a no additional millage bond issue is. So the no new millage bond approach, we're going to make the case that it's the least expensive option to our taxpayers. But we're also going to answer the question, because it keeps coming up, okay, but fine, so the tax rate is not going to increase. Well, what happens if property values increase? And the best answer is, it depends. We're going to cover why we say that today. We're not trying to be elusive. We're not trying to, in any way, shape, or form, obfuscate. We are instead answering that question as honestly as we can, and we have some graphics today to make that case. So first point, the no new millage approach is the least expensive option for our taxpayers. Right now, everyone is interested, as they should be, in trying to keep our taxpayers' burdens low. Recent quotes from Rep. Dave Thomas, from Speaker Matt Huffman, from Rep. Brian Stewart are saying, hey, we're imploring all governments in Ohio to do everything you can to keep our constituents' tax rates low. Our representatives in House Bill 96 and our biennium budget bill cut the tax rates for personal income taxes. And we're going to use that today to kind of draw a parallel to what we're talking about with the no additional bond millage strategy. What I want to focus on is one of the first quotes is Representative Dave Thomas, who had a good conversation with Rep. Thomas 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he is imploring for all schools and local government entities to cut their costs, or to look for ways to cut their revenue sources. Well, in making that plea or that statement, know that the state of Ohio did in the House Bill 96 create a cut in the Ohio personal income tax rate. So basically what this chart shows is that for tax year 2025, on incomes greater than $100,000, there's a $2,394.32 initial charge. And if you're wondering where that comes from, that's exactly what you would get if you do the layer above. And then a 3.125% income tax on anything over $100,000. But starting next year, the new baseline is $26,050. And it is a true about as flat as you can get, meaning it's a $332 initial payment for everyone, and then a flat 2.75% on incomes over $26,050. Doesn't matter what your income is over $26,050, flat 2.75%. So our state legislators have crafted and are trying to cut taxes. Well, as a district, we've done the same. We've done everything we can to keep the tax rate where we can say that we're only increasing it if we absolutely have to. What I thought I would do is look at 25 years of, and sorry, I'm sickened by my spelling of unprecedented, I put an extra N in it. 25 years of unprecedented growth as a district. You can watch as we go all the way from 2000 to 2024. Along the way, where you see the tax rate increase, it is because we passed additional bond issues that were not no additional mills. There were some times in the past where we couldn't do the no additional mills, but if you look at the boxes, even in those years, we didn't collect oftentimes what we had the authority to collect. So for example, we passed a no additional mill bond issue in 2001. And at that point in time, the millage rate was 6.2. We were building fast and furious back then because in 2002, we had to have another bond issue. It was a 1 mill bond issue. We only collected an additional 0.76. You can see that the millage rate dropped then, nominally, to 6.9, but once again in 2004, we had a 1.79 mil bond issue that is what could have been collected, but we did it, no additional mills. We had to unfortunately turn right around in 2005 and have another bond issue, 2.13 mills, only collected 1 mill. And then you can see in 2008, we had our last bond issue where we had to collect anything new. 1.8 mill bond issue, and we only needed 0.82 mills. So let's go from 2008 forward. By 2008, the total millage is 8.72. Take a look at that line from that point forward. It has not gone up since. Now, agreed, it plateaued for a while. But we then actively passed a bond issue in 2011. You can see it was for a half a mil. We collected nothing. And you can see since then, no more increases. We, in 2016, had a I believe that says 3 mil bond issue, collected nothing. No additional bond issue, no additional mill bond issue. Believe it or not, in 2017, the millage rate dropped to 8.64, and then the year later, it dropped to 7.5. In 2020, we passed another bond issue, did not need to collect a single mill. And twice in the last 2 years, we've proactively worked with our auditor to drop it another 1.5 mills. So we've been asked by our state legislators to do everything we can to cut the tax rate, and I believe that this is a graphic representation of how we've tried to do exactly that for our community and our constituents, everywhere we can. We're not always able to do it in every single area, but we're very conscientious about what we're trying to do as a district.
So 6 mills is the lowest in a quarter century, and I don't even know if before 2000, if there's even, I mean, do we even have data on that?
Yeah, you can go all the way back on the Ohio Department of Taxation. I could probably get to about 1990. They had spreadsheets, I think, back that far.
So it's never been lower.
It's as low as it's been in 30 years.
And so 38% of our district's been built with no new millage. I believe it's 13 buildings.
Mr. Jenkins, a
Yes.
quick question for you too on that last slide. We go back into the early 2000s, those times where, for example, 1 mill bond issue passed in 2002, the district only collected 0.76, or the 2.13, but only collected 1. In those instances, I know this is before any of our time on the board here and also before your time, but do we have any historical knowledge? Did the board at that time pass a resolution saying we will not collect millage, and then sneaky did collect the millage?
No.
So, okay, thank you.
Nope. No, in fact, the no additional bond issues in the past, I'm not even sure the board took the proactive statement like we have of saying, we mean it so much that we're putting it in writing. We're not going to increase it. I mean, this shows our track record is just as solid, but yeah, we've gone even a step above in making that a stated vow. If you put it all together, what this means is that in going from 8.72 mils to 6 mils, that's a 2.72 mil reduction. So if you think about what we've just done since 2023, that's a 1.50 mil reduction. So 1.5 of that 2.72 has been within the last 2 calendar years. Within the last 2 calendar years, we've accounted for more than half of that decrease. So I believe that when we tell our constituents we're about doing everything we can to keep their tax bills down, that's what we're trying to do. if that 1.5 mils was still being assessed, the owner of a $500,000 home would pay another $230 in taxes right now. Now, I'm not saying their tax bill went down by $230. I'm saying they would be paying an additional $230 on what they're paying. That 2.72 mils is a $417 savings when you compare what they would be paying versus what they are. Those are real dollars. In my mind, those are real dollars. If you knew that you would be paying right now $500 more than you're otherwise paying, I would take that all day long. That's the same kind of concept with no additional mills. We'll see that in a minute.
And to be clear, that's every year.
Every year. Right. Every year. So our November 4th no additional bond millage is to construct high school 5, elementary 18. It's a $235 million bond issue. Explosive growth is our biggest challenge, but our no additional bond issue allows us to build these facilities for the cheapest approach possible while also providing for instructional facilities for all students. We're a highly successful public school district. We educate more students than all but 3 districts in this state. I think we're education on a public scale done right. So then we get this question. The no new millage approach is the least expensive option, but what's going to happen when values increase? And the answer is it depends. The way we get there, though, is to remember, as our values go up, tax rates go down. I mentioned earlier that in 2025, I know we're in 2025, but we're not going to pay the tax bills on that until 2026. That's a very stable year. There's not a triennial update. There's not a reappraisal. So the value that your home had in 2024, unless you sought a BOR, a Board of Revision complaint, is going to be the same. So if the tax rate stays the same, when your value stays the same, the tax bill stays the same. So that's at least the 2025 year. But then someone might say, okay, but I know 2026 is a triennial update. And when I pay my tax bills in 2027, you can say all you want, Olentangy schools, that the tax rate is going to be the same, but if the value of my home goes up, I'm going to get a bigger bill, right? It depends. And here's why. If our values go up an assumed 10%, you'll notice that our 2025 effective mills for inside mills is 5. For the 2026 pay 2027, it would stay 5. Inside mills don't change. But look what happens to your voted mills. Your voted mills actually drop about 9.1%. And then remember this whole concept of no additional bond mills, it's going to stay 6, okay? The aggregate effective millage will drop from 43.74 to 40.77. That's a 6.8% decrease in tax rates, even though our debt service millage would be constant. Make sense? So what does that mean? Here's a hypothetical. But it's hypothetical that's based in solid math. We have 3 homes in our district. Let's say home A, home B, and home C. Home A, we're going to say, is the average valued $500,000 home. Home B in 2025 is a little bit more than that. And then home C is a really nice, comfortable home in our district at $800,000. Home A undergoes a 5% change in value from 25 to 26, going from $500,000 to $525,000. Home B experiences a 10% change, exactly equal to the rest of the community. Remember our hypothetical? 10%. And that's about what I have forecasted for 26 anyway. So it's going to go to $715,000. And then home C, let's say, really had a nice year, and it went up by 15% to $920,000. Look how the tax bills change. The home that actually increases in value by 5% didn't increase in value at the same rate as the rest of the community. Its tax bill will fall. And that blows people's minds, but that's how it works when you're above the 20 mil floor and the tax rates are reducing. The home that goes up exactly the same as the rest of the community, 10%. Most people would probably say, what's going to happen to your tax bill? It's going to go up 10%. No, 2.44%. I get it, that's still up, but it's not what most people think. And in a home that increases in value by 15%, imagine adding 15% equity in your home in 1 year, the biggest investment most people have. Your tax bill wouldn't go up 15%, it would go up about 7.1%. So the concept of no additional mills when values are increasing, in a lot of ways, is no different than what our state legislators just did in cutting our income taxes. Well, what do you mean, Ryan? I'm going to explain it. If you have a taxable income in 2024 of $95,000, and in 2025, your taxable income goes to $102,000, and in 2026, it goes to $107,500. Your income is increasing. It's increasing by 7.3% and then 5.39%. Our legislators just gave us a tax cut, correct? You're going to pay more Ohio income tax, even though the rate's lower, because you made more money. I don't think anybody would think of that as a bad deal. You still pay less when you think about the alternative. But if you just went, well, year over year, man, I went up 8.86%, and the year after that, I went up 4.68%. I don't think that's the right lens. To me, the right lens is, if the law hadn't changed, then your taxes would have been even more. So the same scenario, only if you look at your 2025 taxes, notice that line's the same as the previous one, 22, 56, 82, 24, 56, 82, 25, 71, 88. But if the law hadn't changed, your tax bills would be higher, so that you're actually saving what would have been but for the change in the law. So it's the same concept when you think about no additional millage. If the rate doesn't change on our bond mills, you are paying less than you otherwise would have if we added the 1.77 mils into the mix. Will your overall tax bill go up or down? It depends on your value and how it appreciates or depreciates compared to the district average. But here's what I know. No matter what your value is or what it becomes, you're paying less than you would have simply by fact that we're not adding 1.77 mils to your tax bill.
So I appreciate the comparison to what that could look like, you know, these different things. I think people also need to keep in mind that there is no solution to all of this where we don't have to do anything.
Correct.
Right? There are kids moving in. And so we're either building schools or paying for trailers that cost a lot of money and eat down our operating costs, which are going to force us to go back to the ballot sooner because we have to pay those costs. We can't just, you know, do something imaginary for the kids. So the challenge to us as a board, to us as a district, is what can we do to make this the lowest impact possible on the community? So really, I mean, there's probably more options, but the three biggest ones are just continue to use temporary measures that just eat up money, cost a ton of money that we get no return on investment, and we're going to just kicking the can down the line, and in the meantime, our construction costs are going sky high, and we've got to pay those later. Or we, you know, start collecting a whole bunch of mills to be able to do this. We collect the 1.77. We're going to pay it off faster, but you're going to pay more in the short term.
Correct.
Or we do something like this where we are keeping the rate steady. Now, you know, there are fluctuations in property values. All of this, it would affect you no matter what. If we had 1.77 mils on here where we pay it down quicker, those are going to go up if your property value goes up too.
That's right.
Right? So there's none of these are a cost-free option. we have to be realistic about what this looks like. This is the least impactful, and it draws it out for a longer period of time. Yes, we are going to have to pay this $235 million. We can't just wave it away. But we are paying it at a rate that is steady and keeping it there, and then we're stretching it out over a longer period of time so that, you know, we hear from senior citizens saying, I can't afford more taxes added on to this. This is a way to address that. Now, again, I appreciate that people have to decide for themselves what this looks like, but you have to decide it within the context of reality, of the reality of the situation that we're dealing with, and they all cost money.
That's right. The reality is, we have 5,000 kids coming. They're in the pipeline over the next 7 to 10 years. Your point is well made, Mr. Lester. Doing nothing will actually be more expensive in the long run than what we're proposing. Is what we're proposing free? Nothing in life is free. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to say that of all the options available, this is the most viable and takes into consideration what we're hearing from our taxpayers, just like I think our state legislators did. You know, you make a flat tax to try to simply get to the point of, you know, easier understandability, trying to keep the tax burden from being too high. But ultimately, everyone knows you're still going to be paying taxes. It didn't go away. That's kind of the same position that we're in as we try to address and have the same high-quality schools for all the new people that we're going to get as we did for everyone who's been here all along.
So if you're doing a victory lap with a state income tax rate cut, the same logic follows with what we've done with bond rates, and the two frameworks put side to side. You can't say, well, I'm happy about the state tax rate because it's going to save me income taxes. Maybe. And then say, well, wait a minute. I know my bond, because of the no new millage, I'm still going to go up. Maybe. But the bottom line is, when we continue to attack the rates, we can do the best we can in the context of we do have a service to provide. So if you really want to cut it, you can just scrap the whole system, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for giving kids an opportunity to maximize their learning. And I think we're doing it for the least possible financial inputs within the context of what we're supposed to be doing.
We have control in that equation. If you think about it, taxes are computed by taking a rate times a value. The part we can control, if you think about any school across the state of Ohio, is the rate. We're doing everything we can to control the rate. We're keeping it as low as we possibly can. That's right. And in a lot of ways, it's what the state of Ohio has had to do. They got to have taxes in order to serve Ohio citizens. So at the end of the day, what House Bill 96 did was it addressed the rate, but it didn't, you know, completely make everyone's tax bill go away.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think to further dig in the weeds, and then we're done here, if you look at what you pay for your bond millage, which means if you look for a per student what they're paying to physically be able to have the school there, I think people will be surprised how low that number is. It's about a quarter of what you could pay to go for a bounce house for an hour. And my numbers, when I'm doing our average price of a home at 0.8, 0.85, you're paying a couple dollars a day in your bond millage property tax rate. Yeah, I don't know how we can
priced
do better
bounce
than that.
houses recently, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
All right.
So if there are no more questions about that, then the items on the agenda tonight for the treasurer action items are the meeting minutes, from September 11th. We have some donations. Julie Lather is here, and I don't know if he was able to make it. No? Yes?
I don't think so.
So Julie has been working with me, and why can't I remember the gentleman's name? I feel terrible. Yeah, I did the same thing to you, didn't I?
Yes.
Okay. The Beck Foundation, though, provided an $8,000 donation for classroom supplies to Oak Creek. So we're asking the Board of Education to accept that tonight. That'll come in very, very handy for the Oak Creek students. The Greater Columbus Surgery and Dental Implants donated $800, as you can see, to Olentangy Liberty Middle School, and then Shirk Orthodontics T-shirts to Orange Middle School. The permanent appropriation resolution is there. That is the official budget for the fiscal year 25-26 school year. That has to be passed prior to October 1. And then finally, the second read in the approval of the completely finished and polished FY26 booster manual. Any questions for me? I did not
Thank you.
have any public participation either.
All right, good. All right, thank you, Mr. Jenkins. So we will then move to the treasurer consent action items, and we'll wait for you to get back. And then if you want to present those action items.
Well done, thank you.
So, board members, tonight, I'm going to ask you to consider with one single motion and ultimate action, item A, approval of donations, item B, the board meeting minutes from September 11th, item C, the approval of the permanent appropriations for fiscal year 26, and then item D, the second read and adoption of the Booster Support Organization Manual. Again, all of these I'm asking by one single motion and vote, unless you'd like to pull any one item or items out separately to discuss.
Would anyone like to pull any of these out separately? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve them as a single slate of consent action items.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Mr. Jenkins?
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Jenkins, the financial forecast item.
Yep. So the financial forecast is a standalone item. Looking for a motion and an approval of the financial forecast.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, hearing none. Mr. Jenkins?
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes. Mr. Meyer, the superintendent consent action items.
Thank you, Mr. Lester. Board members, I recommend approval of the following superintendent consent action items A through G. A, specific human resource items administrative. B, specific human resource items certified. C, specific human resource items supplementals. D, specific human resource items classified. E, specific human resource items classified substitutes. F, recommend to approve student clubs. G, approve business and management items. I'm asking you to approve these items by one single action and vote, unless you'd like to discuss any of these items separately.
Would anyone like to discuss these separately? All right, hearing none, may I entertain a motion to approve them as a single slate of consent action items?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Mr. Jenkins?
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
All right, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right,
Happy
hearing none.
birthday, Terry.
Have a great birthday.
Thank you.
And Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned.